Council special meeting April the 30th, 2020, via electronic communications. This special meeting of the Town Council is being held electronically as provided under the Code of Virginia 2.2-3708.2 subsection A3, which permits public bodies to meet by electronic communications without a quorum physically assembled at one location. Since on March the 12th, 2020, Governor Northam declared a state of emergency for the Commonwealth of Virginia arising from the novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The purpose of this meeting is to review the town manager's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. An audio recording is being made of this meeting. This meeting is also being live streamed on Facebook, as well as being videotaped for viewing from the town's website after processing. Public comments will be accepted this evening via Facebook Live and emails to clark@keepcharles.org. Comments were also solicited to be emailed to the clerk prior to the meeting. All votes taken this evening will be by roll call vote and recorded in the minutes. Any council members who leave the meeting or arrive after the start of the meeting must verbally note their attendance. Only essential business of the town of Cape Charles can be done in this manner. These procedures will remain in effect until COVID-19 crisis has been alleviated. Do any council members have any questions? All right, with that, roll call.
Buckholz present.
Holloway present.
Bannon present.
Bennett present.
Let it be known we've established a quorum. Councilman Grossman will be joining us. Public comments. Ms. Libby?
Grossman present too.
Grossman present. Yeah, Grossman.
Okay. Public comments. I have a number that were submitted via email earlier. The first one is from Hank Mayer, treasurer of the Citizens for Central Park. Says, good evening. I would like to express on behalf of the board and members of Citizens for Central Park our frustration and disappointment in the mayor and town council with its disregard of its obligations to maintain the Cape Charles Central Park playground. The town's Public Works Department removed 2 playground units last spring, 2019, including a very popular zip line. It was our understanding that the zip line would be replaced in the summer, but were later advised that the $12,000 cost had not been included in the fiscal year 2020 budget. This compares with the $100,000 that was budgeted for Main Street staff salaries, office, conferences, and projects. The proposed fiscal year 2021 again provides no funds to replace the zip line in spite of our 2008 memorandum of agreement that the town would be responsible for maintaining the park and playground. Paragraph 3 states, capital improvements become town property, both real and personal, when installed. As such, maintenance is the responsibility of the town. The proposed budget again includes a large commitment, $75,000 versus $80,000 requested, to Main Street staff salaries, office, conferences, and projects, and another $15,000 to reline the Mason Avenue parking area, but nothing for the children of Cape Charles. We know these are difficult times, but really, we are sorry to see that the Harbor for the Arts Summer Concert Program will come to an end this summer. It has been very successful and enjoyed by many residents and visitors, and we've been happy to have sponsored and managed this community program. Perhaps the town can look into reviving it sometime in the future. This next one was provided via Facebook. It was Cape Charles Citizens for Central Park originally posted. The town says it doesn't have any money to replace the zip line it removed from the park playground last spring. It gave its Main Street program $100,000 for staff salaries, an office, conferences, and projects this year, and plans to contribute another $75,000 in the coming year. But they can't find $12,000 to replace the zip line. Contact your favorite council person and vote where it counts. And then Ken Leland responded, why do we need a $12,000 zip line? And Lori Klingel said the zip line was a highlight of the playground. Does it really cost that much? This next one is from John Griffith, President, and Marion Narr, Treasurer of the Cape Charles Historical Society. It says, it appears from the budget document that Cape Charles Historical Society is to receive no funding. I would ask that the town allocate $500 to cover part of the $800 printing cost of the Cape Charles walking tour. It is unlikely the B&Bs will contribute much, if anything, due to having to be closed for so long. The printing of this brochure is imperative this year more than ever. We have not had to reprint since 2015. The walking tour will fit perfectly with social distancing. It is something that visitors can do on their own, learn the history and architecture of our historic town. It is a popular brochure and will be more important than ever this year. We have asked Cape Charles Main Street for some support and feel they may be able to support a portion. The brochure really does not directly benefit Cape Charles Historical Society, even though we and Hank Mayer are contributing volunteer labor to it. I certainly realize the difficult situation facing the town, but in our case, small amounts of assistance would make a big difference. As a suggestion, I note that Art Center will receive a total of $9,000 using the local government challenge grant match, together with the $4,500 town grant, even though most performances and classes likely cannot happen. If the town were to allocate just $4,000 to Art Center, they would still receive $8,000, and the town's $500 could go towards publishing the walking tour brochure. Otherwise, Cape Charles Historical Society will have to fund the entire $800. Our revenues are, of course, also down. We would appreciate your consideration of a $500 to $800 grant from whatever source. Thanks very much. This next email is from Dora Sullivan, and she responded to the email from the Cape Charles Historical Society saying, I hope the town gives something. This next email is from Robert Panic, responding to Hank Mayer's comments, saying bravo. And the last one is from Clelia Shepard and Marianne Ream from the Gear, Fine, and Performance Arts team. The closures mandated by the COVID-19 pandemic have had a devastating effect on our small nonprofit. Classes and workshops have been canceled. Our spring musical, Shrek, experienced a light turnout and a canceled performance, and we were forced to cancel 5 other theater performances, including the Virginia Opera, National Virginia Ballet, and in-house production of Don't Dress for Dinner, among others. There is question when audiences will want to be in a theater or whether children and families will search out dance, art, and theater classes. The arts help drive the economy and the culture in a community, and it is important to keep them alive. We are confident that the town of Cape Charles can help us do that. Gear, Fine, and Performing Arts, formerly Art Center, has been promoting education in the arts and a full theater season in Cape Charles for over 20 years. The town of Cape Charles has been very supportive and has traditionally applied for the Virginia Commission for the Arts Local Government Challenge Grant on our behalf. We depend on the support from the town, the Virginia Commission for the Arts, other grantors, and private donors. The rest of our revenue is generated through programming and ticket sales. We encourage the town to help us, especially now as we attempt to recover. Thank you for your consideration. That was the last one.
All right, well, thank you very much. We'll move on to 4A, F 2021 time budget review discussion. John's going to walk us through this. Basically, it's as everybody knows, you've read it. It's not pretty, but John, I do want to say before we get started, I want to thank John, Deb, and all the staff for slashing, slicing, dicing, and doing whatever they can to get us to where we're at today. So anyway, thank you all very much. And John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments. It was not fun, especially being my first budget. It's hard when you hear comments like that. None of this was fun. But as we know, we are in the midst of a pretty extraordinary event in in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's just having unprecedented impacts everywhere. And here in Cape Charles, it's had significant impact on our revenues, both in fiscal year 20 and in 21. As council knows, we just recently made major budget adjustments to try and keep 20 budgeted. And tonight we'll be talking about 21. So the way I'm going to tackle this is I'm going to give just a broad overview. I'm going to go over my staff report, which is an overview. Then we'll go over some of the other summary sheets for capital and community support and those sorts of things. Then we'll get into the detail. So if you have specific questions about particular departments, I will get to that after we could get all the high level stuff done. So we'll go through those section by section after we get done with the high level stuff. So with that, I'll start in with the staff report. The big issue here is, again, revenue. We're projecting out more than $350,000 less revenue this year than last year. Add to that, the original requested budget for 21 was $140,000 more than the current year. Added the two together makes an almost $500,000 hit that we had to overcome. So I met with every one of the department heads, and Debbie and I scrubbed the budget really hard, and we were able to cut about $268,000 from the budget, which is a lot of money, and it didn't come easy. But that still leaves us about $230,000 short, and that's just in operations. That's just the operational budget. When you talked about capital, now what I'm talking in right now, I'm carving out anything that has a different revenue source, grants, loans, that sort of thing. I'm looking at just what's going to hit the general fund right now. The original request that we're going to hit the general fund was $185,000. Looked at that and have made recommendations to defer $150,000 of that. But that still leaves over $31,000 that I would like to see addressed but unfunded. So when you take the capital and the operating and combine them, the total general fund hit is about $260,000. That's what we're short right now. If you go to the utility fund, that also is showing a projected reduction of revenue of over $31,000. Operating was a little less, but overall, the utility fund operating deficit is still over $21,000. The big one in the utility fund was capital. There was a lot of capital requests and hopes, if you will, of over $685,000, of which I'm recommending $670,000 of it be deferred. And that there's still $15,000 there that I would like to try to fund in the capital budget of the utility fund. The harbor and sanitation funds, since we put this report out on Friday, there's been a couple of changes. One, in the general fund budget, I should have mentioned it a moment ago. I was going to talk about it when we get to detail. There was a $1,000 difference there. We found out our insurance premiums were $1,000 more than we thought they were last Friday, so that's going to go up by $1,000. In the sanitation fund, we made it our best estimate as to what we thought the increased cost for trash removal was going to be. We guessed low. We found out what the rate was after we put the package out, and so the deficit, the operating deficit in the sanitation fund is going to be $8,881. Additionally, an oversight on my part, I neglected to include the sanitation capital in my staff report. There is a request for $12,000 to buy new trash cans. So there's the $12,000 for capital and the $8,800 in operating. So there's a $20,000 deficit in sanitation. The harbor is no capital to speak of this year. That operating deficit is going to be about 6,800. So when you take all of those and you add them together, the total deficit across all funds is $324,000 plus. So to get there, I wanted to just make sure everyone understood that, you know, the number one, we cut everything that we thought we could get by with, but the majority of our budget, like most organizations, are our people. They're our most important, most valuable asset. They're also our biggest expense. So even though there were some real legitimate needs to make some adjustments with staff salaries and potentially look at COLAs and that sort of thing, we didn't do any of that. So this budget is flat. There are no new salary increases. There is no COLA in this budget. Other traditional funding sources that were hard to cut were things like community support, as the comments you heard, and just normal things that we should be doing for the future, like planning for our comprehensive plan. That funding got deferred. Proactive maintenance, preventative maintenance, things like trying to map our storm drains. We started that project, but that's going to have to go on pause. So despite all of this cutting, we still have a huge deficit. So there's three ways to deal with a deficit. You either reduce spending, you raise revenue, or you draw from reserves. And they should happen in that order. So I think we did our due diligence on the first one. We did our best to cut expenses as much as possible, even after absorbing all of the inflationary costs we get every year. I mean, electricity alone went up 10% across the board. I mean, all the inflationary pressures that were part of the 21 budget, we absorbed all that, and what's before you tonight is still 6.7% less than last year's budget. So I think if we cut any more from operations, we're going to seriously impact our ability to provide basic core services. So that takes you to the second one, raising revenue, AKA tax increases. In a typical situation, after you've done all you can to reduce expenses, that's normally the right place to go, because that's the only way you can maintain you can have a sustainable budget. But we're not in a normal situation right now, and I am very concerned that trying to tax a struggling economy right now would just prolong the situation we're in. So I am not recommending that we do that right now. So if we can't cut anymore and we can't increase our revenue, that only leaves the third one, which is to draw on reserves. My recommendation to do that is to draw from our fund balances. We do have sufficient fund balances to do that this year, but the budget that it would fund would be bare bones. I mean, it's just the minimum we need to meet our statutory obligation and put an operation budget in place. I don't like this recommendation. This budget as proposed does not address the long-term needs of the town. And as I said, it's not sustainable. We can't continue to just draw from reserves. So I make the recommendation that we hit fund balances only if you, or my recommendation is tied to another recommendation. And that recommendation is that we meet again in September. After we see exactly what kind of a summer season we actually will have, we'll have a better idea of what our revenues will be, and we'll have a chance to do some better financial planning. I'm still fairly new, and despite the Herculean efforts of Debbie to try to drag me along, I still have a little bit of a learning curve to go. So September would buy me more time to help develop some fiscal strategies, and would give us an ability to see exactly what kind of revenue we have. And then we can, and then we would plan to amend the budget then based on that information. So what I want to do is run through our fund balances. Because if I'm asking you to use that as the funding source, it's important that you have an understanding of where we are with that. I did not include that information with the original packet or with my staff report because I was not comfortable yet with the numbers. I wanted to speak to the auditor and make sure that my read of the financial statements were correct. So I did that. Debbie and I met with the auditor to confirm what I'm going to tell you. In my opinion, generally, the audit report is very well laid out, very well written. I've seen some pretty poor examples of audits, but this one I think is mostly well laid out. However, there are some accounting issues with it that I don't like, that I'm going to recommend that we address in the future. They don't, it's not as transparent as it could be. If you look on page 11 of the audit, for example, it shows what our fund balance is. It shows $3.8 million. That is very misleading. We don't have anywhere near that in actual dollars. When you take out unspent bond proceeds and prepaid items, it actually comes down to about 3.2 million. But in the harbor fund, we have booked in the past expenses that the harbor fund is not and will never be able to repay. A lot of it was capital in the past. So if you look on page 15 of the audit, you'll see over $2 million liability to the harbor fund. That needs to be addressed, and we've talked to the auditor about how to potentially do that, and I'll be bringing that forward to you later as far as a mechanism to do that. But for this purpose, we have to be able to account for that. Eventually, what that's going to mean is a fund transfer from the general fund to the harbor fund to write that off and clear the books. When you take that liability into account with the general fund number, so that 3.2, I'm going to use somewhat round numbers here for discussion purposes. That 3.2, when you take 2 million away, takes you down to 1.2. So that means our fund balance in the general fund is about 1.2 million. Now, I'm recommending that you fund this budget with that. If you follow that recommendation and fund the budget without any additional increases, that takes us down to just under $1 million, about 997,000. Still sounds like a fair amount of money. But what I'm concerned about, and what we'll address again in September, is we have no financial guidelines in how to manage our reserves. Right now, yes.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. I was with you up until that last bit of math. So 3.2 million actually in the fund balance, $2 million deficit for the harbor fund leaves $1.2 million. I thought the deficit we were looking at was 324,000 across all funds.
Correct. I'm speaking of just the general fund. So you're
Okay.
correct. So just the general fund portion. I'll speak to the other. I'm going to cover all the funds. I'm just speaking of the general fund right now. So the general fund hit was 267,000. So when you take that away from the 1.2, you get just under $1 million. A good question, though. Thanks for clarifying that. So as I was saying, we don't have any way of protecting our fund balance. And it's critical. Organizations need that just to maintain cash flow. There's nothing stopping the council right now from just meeting and deciding you want some big fancy capital project and appropriating the whole fund balance. That we need to address. And I'm not going to set policy here tonight, but I do need to just throw out a placeholder for discussion purposes. And what I'll throw out as a placeholder is a 20% of operating budget. So it's not uncommon to reserve 20% of your budget to maintain cash flow in the event of some catastrophic emergency. The budget before you is a $4 million budget. 20% of that is 800,000. So if we're going to use that just for a placeholder right now, if we've got $1 million-ish, we're going to reserve 800,000. That means we've got $200,000 left. That's it. That's our wiggle room going forward. That's not a lot of money. Council had talked about in January potentially establishing a rainy day fund, which I think is also a good idea. The rainy day fund magnitude that you were discussing back then was about $250,000. if we do that, and I will suggest that we do, that gets layered on top of the minimum fund balance. You don't use the fund balance for that. So you put your minimum in there. That's something you need to maintain at all times for cash flow. And then if you want a rainy day fund, it goes on top of that. So if, again, these are just round numbers for discussion purposes, but if we had the $800,000 for our fund balance limit, we've got 200,000 left. There's your rainy day fund. We're done. There's nothing else left. So just trying to paint the picture for you of how tight it is right now. And if you read the audit, you don't get that impression. And so we're going to clean up the audit or some accounting so that next year's audit shows that a little bit better. Now, if we move to the utility fund, there's a problem here too. The utility fund, I think it's on page 15, shows a fund balance of $1.18 million. Again, sounds pretty good. However, there is, apparently it seems to be somewhat unwritten, but I need to research more. There is a connection fee reserve that council implemented a number of years ago that was to be put aside for potential plant expansion, which is great. That's a wonderful idea, but that is not showing up in the financials. So Debbie has just recently calculated what that would be, and that's just over $1 million. So that's the good news. The bad news is if you take that $1 million and you commit it or restrict it from the fund balance that's showing in financials, that only leaves about $110,000 left. So when I say we're going to hit the fund balance for operations this year, it's that $110,000 that we have to work with. Again, just trying to paint a clearer picture than the audit might show. In the utility fund, we're looking at about $21,000 in operating deficit and $15,000 in capital. If you hit that 110 balance, it leaves you with about 73. So again, very tight. In the sanitation fund, that one's somewhat more straightforward. There's no hidden numbers that I could find there. It's a pretty straightforward fund. It shows a fund balance of $280,000. We're suggesting that we fund this budget $20,000 worth from that, which would leave $260,000. As a percentage of the whole, that's the best fund balance we've got. So $260,000 left for the sanitation fund is a pretty healthy reserve there. So that's the good, bad, and ugly on the fund balances. We can do what's been requested here, but it reinforces my comment earlier. This is not sustainable. This is a short-term solution to buy us time to come up with a long-term fix. The other thing that's changed since Friday when we sent this out, if you have the capital budget, the capital budget spreadsheet that shows all the projects, I'm going to talk to that next. This one, the very last column, because it's cost to the town, that was the general the amount that would hit each of these respective funds.
So John, we're looking at version 2C.
Yes, 2C, version 2C. I made a mistake, or I had a bad assumption when this was first put together. In the column right next to that, in the column it says reappropriation from fund balance. Initially, there was $200,000 in the trail use phase, the multi-use trail phase 3. I was under the assumption that had been appropriated from a prior fund balance and was still available. I've learned that's not the case. That money would have lapsed into the fund balance this year, but would it had to been reappropriated next year? And we don't. And as I just explained, we don't have another $200,000 in the fund balance to pull from. So I had to defer that as well. So that's why that column is 0, and there was 200,000 in there in the first sheet that you got on Friday. Other than that, the general fund column is I think the same as it was. The only thing that I've recommended in here was about $6,800 for some heat for public works. I just think that's just a basic working condition need, and it's not a huge amount of money. Those guys don't have any heat out there in the winter, and I would like to try and do that for them. There's $15,000 in there for the Mason Avenue restriping. That seems to be a hot button item. If you really wanted to or needed to, I suppose that could be deferred a year. Then there's the parking lot maintenance at $10,000. We're just maintaining what we have. We have to do that. So that's the 31,000 hit to the general fund. Moving down to the utility fund, the only one that I left in there was $15,000 for a SCADA system. That's a software package that would help the water plant be able to monitor it more remotely and do things. It would help us cover it in an emergency situation similar to what we're in now. We have something similar at the wastewater plant now, and so the idea was to upgrade the water plant to have that same capability. And again, based on the fact that we are fairly lean on people, and if people were getting sick, the more that we can do remotely seemed like a fairly good idea to me. So I tried to leave that in there. However, it's an upgrade. It's not something that we have now, and if you needed to, that could be deferred as well. So that's the 15 that would hit the utility fund. There's nothing in the harbor fund as far as capital goes. And then we spoke about the 12,000 that will be used to buy garbage cans in the sanitation fund. So that's the rundown on capital. On community support, and this was probably, this was one was very hard. Well, so what we try to do is maintain the traditional support for the fire department. And other than that, we tried to just maintain our obligation. So the gear money was because it's matching money. So it's dollar for dollar. It has more power that way. So, but we did reduce it. We, the state grant used to be $5,000 and the town matched it $5,000. Well, the state dropped theirs to $45,000, but the town never dropped theirs. So I did drop it $500 so that we're only putting in what was needed to match the state grant. And then there's Main Street. And I did not discuss this with anybody from Main Street, except I tried to notify Tammy that it was happening before the budget came out, but I did not discuss a reduction with anybody in advance. And I guess my reasoning for why this is still in here, and again, no discussion with anybody from Main Street on this, this is just my thoughts or opinions, is that we are a tourist-driven town. That's what drives our economy. And sometimes when you're out of money, you have to spend money to make money. And that's why I wanted to try to continue to support an organization that needs to help us recover from this. And anyway, that was my rationale for leaving that in there. I did drop them down $5,000 because everybody's kicking in, and so I reduced it a little bit. But I did that strictly on my own. That's in there strictly on my own, not because anybody asked me or told me to do that. I will say this though, with regard to the one comment on the Historical Society, that $500, I probably would have put that in there, except the request was $5,000, and so I went right past it. I didn't do that. When it came back as a $500 to help with the publishing, I did know that I got it in an email, but frankly, I just didn't get around to getting back to it. So that does not seem like an unreasonable request, and the $500 for that, I think we could absorb. So it's not in here, but I certainly wouldn't oppose it if you wanted me to put it back in. Other than that, well, the idea being that this is not a permanent year-long budget. This is just to get us through a couple of months. We're going to look at this again in September. If we're in a better position, maybe we can help folks out a little bit more. But that's where we are on community projects, community support. Does anybody have any questions on the big picture that I've covered so far?
Nope.
Okay. So what I'd like to do next is start going into the detail pages, and the way I like to do this is just by section. I'm not going to hover over each line item. I want to go. I'll ask: does anybody have any questions about this department? If no one's got questions, we'll move on to the next one. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity to hover over each department for a few moments, and if you have a specific question about a line item, then that's the opportunity to raise it.
Okay, and John, we can come back to these other ones later if they're like the capital projects.
Yes, yeah. This is just my initial explanation. Once I'm done talking, then yes, and it's open to council's debate, and I'll take whatever direction you want to give me.
Okay.
Starting with general fund revenue. Now, this looks a little, it looked odd to me when I looked at it, because the real property taxes look somewhat level if you're only looking at the bottom line. But you really have to look all the way up at the prior year receivables. We collected a lot more last year, this current year, than we think we will next year. Really, if you look at the 2019 property tax line item, the $1,155,000, compare that to the $1,223,000. That's more of the apples to apples comparison there. We did get about $10 million worth of new construction that is captured here. That's $27,000 ish in additional revenue. We were also allowed to keep 1% of increased assessed value revenue without doing anything special about it, and we did take that. That's about $12,000. So the way it works, the assessments went up. And typically what the town does is lower its tax rate so that the end tax bill does not go up. We are currently at 0.2945 per 100 in our tax rate. We would have to reduce it to 0.2731 in order to keep the effective tax rate the same. If you're curious, 1 penny increase gets us about just $45,800 in additional revenue. That's about $33 for someone with a $300,000 house. So that's property tax. The next big section that is of notice on 350, where this is where we take all kinds of hits here. This is BPOL, admissions tax, tot, meals, short-term rental. This is where we're seeing one of the biggest impacts from COVID-19 is right here in this section. And to be honest, this is just our estimate. I mean, we don't have a crystal ball. This is just an estimate. And again, why we want to look at this again in September. Other than that, I'm not going to go through every line item. Does anybody have any particular questions about general fund revenues?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. You're recommending the standard or the 1% in your budget. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm not recommending any tax increase.
Right.
He's talking about not equalizing, which we normally do.
Right.
No.
We're not.
No,
Yeah,
I am. Yeah, we are going to equalize. So we would have to reduce our tax rate in order to,
Yeah, I got it.
right? Yeah, that's what I'm recommending. I'm recommending that we reduce our tax rate so the effective tax bill doesn't go up. Any other questions on revenue?
No, other than what I talked to you today about the golf cart thing. That number, that number shouldn't go down because the golf carts, we're not losing golf carts, really. So that
But-
revenue should be the same because
Well,
I mean,
I looked at it after we talked, Andy, but it's only going down $500.
yeah, I know. I know it's not much, but
And I guess our thought process was that we were going to get a lot fewer visitors this summer, and people who normally might get the license and inspection might not. I mean,
well, those are existing golf carts that are in the community. It's not rental people come here. They get carts that are owned here.
I can tell you right now, Andy, there's people that come here to bring their car back in the back.
And what'd you say? Do they get inspected?
They come, they visit, they bring their own golf cart and they get them inspected.
Hmm.
And they may not come. So that's, I mean, I don't think he's far off on that.
Fair
But
enough.
in Maryland, it does it.
and again, we'll look at this in September. If we guessed wrong,
Yeah,
all the better. I'd rather add money in September than take it away.
yeah, I hear you.
Any other questions on general fund revenue?
I do. Just for clarification, short-term rental tax is for these things like kayaks, golf carts, and that's what it says. I just want to make sure for those listening, that's not short-term rental as they normally think of it.
Correct. Yeah, that would be other tot. Right. Yes.
It's just for the audience listening to clarify.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions on revenue? All right, we will move to general fund expense. First section is legislative,
What page?
4110. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just trying to find what page.
Page 6.
Page 6.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions about the legislative section? Is there any line item there that anybody wants any clarification on? Hearing none, we'll move to page 7, the town clerk. Anything on the town clerk's line items? Okay. Moving on to town manager. This is on pages 7 and 8, and again, this is where there'll be that $1,000 increase over what you see here for insurance because we didn't have our full premium noted. Any other questions on the town manager line items?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
The part-time salaries and wages. Is that for the capital projects manager?
Yes, sir.
So if we're not doing any capital projects and that's the same,
It is. It is, and I thought about that, and I guess I'm being a little conservative and optimistic at the same time that we'll be making some adjustments in September to reemploy him.
okay.
All right, moving on to page 10, finance. Anything, do you have any just still on page 10, just up on the very bottom of the manager's section, it's something I do want to call your attention to, and that's the contingency line item. It's just pretty important to have contingencies because you never know what's going to happen, and it shows $40,000. But what I did when I was going through all the department budgets is rather than have money stashed all over the place, I pulled money out of people's budgets and I stuck it in one place. So it says 40,000, but that incorporates other contingencies, like for code compliance, for the police academy. We've kind of forward funded our fireworks for 4th of July, and as long as we stay with the same vendor, that's fine. But if we change with a different vendor, we're gonna have to true that up. And so anyway, these are just various contingencies. It only leaves about $20,000 left that's truly undesignated. So that's not a lot of wiggle room. So just wanted to let you know, so you see that we just don't have a lot to play with this year. All right, now moving on to finance. Any questions on finance?
I have a question, John. Looking at these things, most of the departments are level or down. There's a couple of departments that are up. This is one of them. And just a general reason for the increase.
Well, our HR we promoted Jody to be HR manager, and she got an increase for that. Also, when we did a recent reorg, a number of people got increased responsibilities, and so there were some deployed salary increases there. And Debbie, is there anything else that I should mention here?
Merchant service charges are up about 2,000. That's for the credit card fees. I think what else?
Oh, they're talking about the regular salaries.
No, not just salaries, but merchant services are up 2,000 too, is the bottom line. The salaries is Jody's promotion, and then utility billing clerk, she has more responsibilities now with the reorg, so she got a very small increase to handle that. And also health insurance has gone up for all departments.
And I just want to also clarify that these increases in salary occurred this fiscal year. Okay, they were already committed to in 20. There are no new salary increases in the 21 budget. I just want to clarify that.
Understood.
Oh,
Tell me again, Debbie, about the merchant services.
The merchant service charges they've gone up a little bit, $2,000. It just seemed, I don't know if people are using credit cards.
40%, that's not a little bit.
What? No, I mean, it's gone up. The other thing is one or two of the time clocks will likely they were 4 or 5 years old, so they'll likely be replaced. So we've put an additional 1,000 in there to replace 2 time clocks.
Okay.
You'll see the merchant services fees will be up in the harbor as well. That's
Is
pretty
that
much
something
it.
that we absorb that could be passed on to?
We can charge that 1% that we've been charging. We do that, but we did suspend the credit card fees just for the emergency period that we find ourselves in right now.
Is there any reason why we don't do what the federal government does and the county does? They charge, 3.5, 3.9% for using your credit card. It's a convenience fee. You can legally do it.
They go through official payments for that. They don't get to keep that fee. They have to go to a separate website, and our taxpayers can use that service as well, but it is more expensive. I find that we collect a lot more, that we offer credit card services in-house now.
All right.
Anything else for finance? All right, moving on to police on page 12. Now the salaries are up here because we do have an additional police officer this year.
Is that
And
what
you-
this general increase is based on? Is the new officer? No, it's a
I'm sorry?
21% increase, so.
Right. Yeah, a lot of that's personnel costs. So you see salaries going up 15%, and healthcare and retirement's also gone up.
So while we're here, I'll just go ahead and ask now because it's in a number of places, but, and I know we buy a police vehicle every year. But in the summary sheet that we looked at on capital projects, none of that money hits the town in FY21 for any of those vehicles. So why is that?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I meant to cover that when we did the capital and I forgot. Yes, anything that was requested that I felt was legitimate and needed that qualified for the USDA grant loan program, we put in there because, well, one, a big chunk of it's a grant that someone else is paying for, and it's a low interest loan right now. The loan, the first payment on the loan isn't due until next fiscal year. So,
Okay.
but it does skew these numbers a little bit because the expense is shown in this year. So let's say we're going to buy a new police car. That cost of that, the expense of that car is in here. The revenue is offset by a grant and loan proceeds. So there's no change in the deficit for the year. But if you try to compare the bottom line numbers here in the detail with my staff report, there may be some differences because of that, because I didn't include those in my staff report. But yeah, if you look on the second page of the capital was a page that just showed all of the USDA capital equipment that we're talking about. It's significant. It's $254,000 that we'll be able to take advantage of this year, but we won't have to account for this year. Anything else on police? Moving to code enforcement on page 13.
Somebody's got some emails or something in here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Steve.
Hearing none for code enforcement, we'll go to Public Works. Now, one thing in Public Works, part of the equipment that qualified under the USDA was buying equipment to help with our lawn maintenance. So by getting that equipment, we are not having to renew that contract. So it's going to be a significant savings this year and then every year following.
we're not going to renew what contract? Browder Height? The contract they currently hold?
Debbie, who's the
It's Browder Height. I think we still plan on keeping the one for Central Park, but the other maintenance around town, the Public Works crew would like to try.
And the town is also cutting grass themselves out to the corridor.
That's right.
You remember our discussions months ago with Dave Barber, we were contracting out a portion of that work and we left for further discussion what to do with the corridor, and in talking with Deb and John, that is being covered by the town.
Yeah, the town has done it for the past, how many years anyway?
Yes, if you look on line 3040, that's the line item that shows that, it's a 64% drop, and that's the line item that captures the savings.
I have a question under Public Works. I don't know where it falls. One of our ways we prioritized last year with budget was by our priorities. And one of the concerns, and we certainly don't know what our visitor load will be this year, but enough people to do the bathrooms and the trash and sanitation. And I think this year I'm concerned we might have to have somebody on the beach as I don't know if that'll come under police or what, but as far as distancing. But mainly I wanted to talk about making sure that we have coverage in here for bathroom cleaning, trash removal, and all of those things that we need higher in the summer season.
It looks like one of the big increases, Tammy, to me, it's this line 40, 60, 25. janitorial and kitchen, public restrooms cleaned, hand washing station.
And we've also increased overtime too, so for that purpose.
Very
Good.
clarified.
All right, just wanted to double check. I couldn't find it.
Hold on a second. Let's just make sure we clarify janitorial and kitchen.
Janitorial and kitchen line in 6025, that's for the cleaning supplies and paper products and things of that nature. The labor is up in salaries and overtime.
Correct. But I mean, that line is significantly increased.
Right.
Right.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Public Works? Parks and Rec, on page 17. It's pretty straightforward. The last part of it that's on 18 is the biggest, probably the biggest hit on the 6100 line item. That's where we fund most of the things we do, and that's down about 25%. Moving on to library. Any questions there? Okay. Planning. As a side note, we're starting to get some decent applications. There are a lot more applications in on that. I'll be going through those on the plane tomorrow.
Good.
Paul's cheaper.
He's harder to work with.
Yeah. That is correct.
Well, I tell you what, it was a blessing having Paul's critical eye around looking at this budget, because I'm new and we were trying to get it done quickly, and I appreciated his help with that. So that's it for planning, and I think that's it for general fund. We'll move on to public utilities fund. Any question on the revenues here? Again, if you try to compare what's here with what's in my staff report, it's going to get thrown off a little bit, because you'll see like the truck and remote meters and that kind of revenue that we're getting from the grant and the loans is recognized here. I did not include that in my memo, so that's the discrepancy there. Any other? It's fairly straightforward. Any other questions on revenue? On expense, utility admin. Hearing none. Water department.
Good H2O.
Okay. Sewer. And utility billing. All right, so moving on to harbor.
Hold on, I'm going to retouch the question I asked you yesterday. So I still can't find it. I know former Public Works and Utilities manager was in the 60s. His salary was 60s. We're showing minus 49, but each one of these lines, there's an increase for salaries. So I need that to be explained to me, where that's at. where the rest of that other $20,000 or so is at, 15, whatever that amount.
I'm gonna, yeah, it's deployed through it's through a number of different line items. Debbie, I'm gonna pass that one to you.
Of course, the promotions that were given absorbed a portion of that. The remainder, if you look, we really increased the repairs and maintenance budgets on both the water and the sewer and in public works. So I would say that's where that savings went.
The repair and no, I'm looking at, I'm just looking specifically at regular salaries, nothing else.
Salaries, you don't see the increases in,
Do, but there should be a decrease somewhere because of,
the decrease would be in the admin, utility admin budget. And I wasn't sure what to do with it. We allocate a portion of the town manager, treasurer, and accountant salaries to water, sewer, and harbor. So I kind of kept that department open, and we put a $10,000 contingency in there as well to be used by, so you'll see that decrease right there. Do you see it?
yeah, that's not my question. I see it there. That's forward of nothing, but I know that position was like 60-some thousand dollars.
Right.
Do water, it was 137 this year, and it's 140, and I know that's included. That's got what name's Scottish raise in it. Then I go down here to sewer. That's 167 to 183. I mean, that's a big jump, and I know Patrick didn't get that much of a raise. And then I come down to, well, I guess that's Patrick and Billy combined. Never mind.
Yeah, that's Patrick and Billy combined.
But I'm just wondering, there should have been some minuses. There should have been that because there's another $15,000 or $20,000 floating from the position. There should have been minuses in each one of these.
Part of it also went to general fund to the public works director. And a piece of it went to the HR director. And then the additional amount that was left, those were absorbed in the repairs budgets for water and sewer. I could send you a list of exactly how it was broken down.
All right,
We'll do that.
What I'm saying is those, I'm thinking that those salaries should have been a little bit less. But I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but it's not reflecting it where it should be reflected in my mind.
Well, it is in, if you look in utility admin on the very top line, regular salaries.
Mhm.
In 2020, it was 44,954, and it's zero this year.
Right. So
There's the minus there.
another $20,000 out there, $23,000 floating somewhere.
That's in the general fund. A part of it, it's in the public work. If you look in the public works, let me find out what page that's in. The remainder is there.
Yes. Let me rephrase this. So that position was never under salaries. There was no allocated wages for that position under salaries, under sewer. There was no allocated under water, it was just.
It was all in utility admin and in public works admin.
Okay, all right, that explains it. All right,
Okay.
I've got it. Okay, I've got it now. Sorry about that. All right.
Thanks for bailing me out of that one, Deb.
All right.
All right, here we moving on to harbor. Again, any on harbor revenue? Any questions? Harbor expenses. Overall deficit about 6,800. All right, moving on to sanitation, our last one. Now this one, because of we just learned of the rate increase, the cost has for the trash pickup has gone up to 220,000. So that's an increase. If we were to try and balance that with rates, right now we're at $14.87. We'd have to go up to $16.43. That would cover both the rate increase and purchasing the new trash cans. If we allow the trash cans, the capital to fall to fund balance, that's a difference of $1. So I'm not recommending those. I'm not recommending that for right now. I'm recommending, of all the fund balances, this is probably the healthiest one. So my understanding is that we had a rate increase here last year. And rather than hit it 2 years in a row, my recommendation is we leave it alone, and we just hit fund balance for that remaining amount. Any questions about sanitation?
John,
Yes.
can I go back? I have a question under Harbor I missed. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Under merchant services on page 33, I noticed that it's going up by 41%.
That's the credit cards.
I was just curious why it's going up so significantly. They get a new system, or are they doing something different, or?
The rate, I actually had a meeting with the salesperson, and he says it's usage, that people are using it more. And so that's affecting our costs. And the harbor, also, it's they have two systems over there. One of them is they have to use, if they store the credit card for the accounts in the computer, they have to use that system. So they use that one as infrequently as possible because that one's really high, like 3.5%. Then we purchased the other system that's only like 1.7, 1.2%, depending on the type of card. So we're encouraging to use that as much as possible. And they're trying harder. They used to just hit the easy one, but now they're trying to hit the cheaper one.
And so the boaters that come in and they're doing gas, they put their card in. Is that what you're saying? Like it's more use there? Are we charging them the right percentage? Are we getting enough?
We can't go over the 1%. There's strict rules about charging.
Oh, it's the same type of, okay, I get it. I got it. Thank you.
I had one more question as well on Harbor, and that's the need for this vehicle.
Where are they driving to is the harbor?
Yeah, I mean, that's my question. And I mean, there's three old police cars parked over at the wastewater plant. I mean, don't we have a vehicle they can use for running around? I mean, does he need to haul something?
Yeah, to be able to tow the boat, the truck they have now is fairly small. And this truck is one of the ones that qualifies for the USDA program.
I understand that, but there's debt service associated with that will be in future years.
Of course.
The harbor master is using his own boat to haul it, to go across the bay to get things because the bed's too small in the other one. He's using his own truck a lot.
Why
To
isn't he?
haul what across the bay?
Oh, yeah, what's he getting across the bay?
Oh, he had a lot of the materials. I think one time it was the sewage pump for the pump out, and he wood for the dock for repairs, and we went over to get parts for the harbor master office, flooring, things like that.
But if we
Yeah,
don't,
I don't know. I really he needs a pickup truck to go across the bay 3 times a year. I mean, there are other pickup trucks in public works and public utilities. You could borrow one of those, in my opinion.
I agree.
I agree. I'm a little concerned that they're buying wood across the bay and not local, but I just have to put that in.
They buy local too, but certain types of wood, I think they can only get in certain places.
Okay. I understand that.
Treated to be in water and things like that.
Got it.
Okay, so do I hear consensus to take that out?
I would agree with that too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul.
I would agree to take it out.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
It's
Me
it's
too.
gone.
Yes.
Oof, it's gone.
Okay, it's gone. Anything else on the harbor? All right, that's the bulk of my presentation. All I'll say before I just open it up for general discussion, when we come, if you approve of my strategy here, when we come back in September, a number of things that we'll need that I'm committed to working on and having ready by then. First, of course, is our better revenue projections, hopefully. But I want to bring forward formal proposals that you would adopt via resolution or some other form that would set minimum fund balances across the funds. Another one that would establish a rainy day fund. One that would implement a long-term capital improvement program. That one needs a lot of thought. You approved a guidance for that last January, and it was a great start, but no one ever picked up that ball and ran with it. Actually taking that guidance and putting it into some sort of a program with actual projects and try to put actual funding to it. That's the hard part. And then put that against certain agreed upon priorities. So the fund balance, the rainy day fund, CIP program, and then maintenance items for the budget that, like cleaning up the harbor fund deficit. Those will require formal council action. So all those types of things is what I would be working toward for a September review. Now,
John, a question.
Yes.
Does that capture I don't know if it was the auditor, but we just had within the past 6 months, a presentation on our finances that came off very good, but within that report had recommendations on those kinds of policies to be set up. So is that what you're referring to?
I've got that presentation on my desk and I have not looked at it in detail yet, but I will. But that does remind me of something else that I was supposed to mention earlier and blew by it. Something else that we're looking at doing between now and then is looking at refinancing our debt. So we're in a fairly good position right now to go out and test the waters. We're not committing ourselves to anything. But we want to go out and see what is possible. And where we're hoping for is something that would reduce our cash flow needs without extending our long-term debt duration or requirement. So taking advantage of lower interest rates right now, we could look at, especially if this recovery is going to take a couple of years for us to fully get out of, if we can reduce our debt fund commitments by even $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, that's meaningful. And so Debbie and I will be working on that. We'll be putting in some applications and putting out some requests for information on that. And once we have that, we'll bring it back to you and discuss it, and then you can decide whether or not to actually go forward with it. So that's something we're working on too. Now, as part of that, I believe what that presentation did, what I've heard of it, is that it alluded to the fact that you have the ability to perhaps incur more debt. And that may be the case. I would be very cautious about it. So that's something we can talk about when we bring this forward. You could not just refinance existing debt. You could layer on some additional obligations. In an uncertain world, with us being this tight, I would be very cautious. But we'll talk about that and bring that forward between now and September. And so that's where we are for now. In looking at all this, just as a heads up, for next year, longer term things I would like to work on is a little bit of budget restructuring. as far as what is an enterprise fund, what isn't, how do we classify certain things, how do we organize departments. Looking at it as just kind of a new guy for the first time, some of it doesn't seem as efficient. So, but that's a longer term goal of mine that hopefully this time next year, maybe I'll be pitching those ideas to you. So, Mr. Mayor, that is the conclusion
John?
of my presentation.
John, I have a question on
Yes,
the
sir.
Central Park. I was going to see how the whole thing was going. The bands in Central Park are for the tourism. It's really fantastic. It's a real Americana scene, a small American town. Is there any way, I don't want to, Tammy, hang on. Are these mandatory payments for deadline payments for Main Street? Or could you take some money at that and just pay it later in your budget in the year?
That question.
Tammy, you want to answer that?
Yeah, the majority of, and the comments that were made earlier are like a third of what Main Street's budget is as far as used for. The majority is, especially now, the most important, that is marketing the town and getting people back through a multitude of strategies. So we took the $16,000 cut this year and had to cut some things that were pretty important. And this money, marketing wise, is going to be more important than ever. We are looking at our budget to tighten it as much as possible, but it isn't good for the health of the town for us to cut that. And we have shown that the commitment from the town was, I think, 80,000 or something as far as the designation goes. But I mean, we are using that money as tightly as possible. As you know, Main Street's trying to co-sponsor one of the concerts with Central Park and show kind of our support kind of in doing that. But there isn't event money. I mean, there just isn't. The budget is so lean of what is there to get the job done. It's primarily marketing money, which is really was just a transfer. That marketing money would have appeared in the town's budget in a different line before. I know that's hard for conceptually to understand, but I don't think that there is. One of the things that Main Street does is runs a financial fundraising. I mean, we raised $22,000 last year on our own because $75,000 isn't our budget. It's like 120. So we try to do that through grants and other budgets. So, my suggestion, which I've suggested before, is that Central Park go to the people who really enjoy it, that are very vocal about supporting it, and do a GoFundMe or a campaign that really funds strictly the concerts. And I think you get that money pretty easily. I mean, that's where Main Street's using the money that we talked about, like for salaries and things like that. We're trying to use that other money that comes from the town straight up for marketing, physical beautification, and those things. We've even cut the physical beautification. Everybody, like our own budgets at home, we were having to cut things very, very lean.
Yeah. I'd like to chime in on various things. But we'll start with Citizens for Central Park and Main Street. It bothers me to no end that I get this attack from one nonprofit to another. Ask for your request and leave it at your request, and don't attack some other nonprofit entity. I mean, that bothers me. And for Citizens for Central Park, realistically, go local this year. Use local bands instead of paying $3,000 for a band. Pay $300 for a band. There's bands lined up all over the place, and just continuing on and do what you can do. But I would like to say I would support the $500 for the Historical Society for the printing of that. If the rest of if we can squeeze it, I would support that. Go ahead, Andy.
I'll do that. Can take my salary, whatever I make, the $50 a month, and put it towards that. I'm fine doing that. If I can do that, Deb, put my money towards that brochure.
I'll do that with you, Andy. I'll do the same thing with you.
For me, that little, money I would go take myself out to dinner, I'll come up with it some other way. just put my salary towards that, please.
All right, thank you.
So, but anyway,
Well, that, as I say, the walking tour, I just want to comment real quickly. It's going to be more important than ever with people coming over and needing to do things kind of within their own person and being like the social distancing and doing that. And it is super, super popular. And the Historical Society has been great to foot that bill. And that Marion said, I helped her with that. The B&Bs just don't have the money this year to do that. And it's unfortunate. We shouldn't have had to really pay for it before, but we just felt like it was so important. Chris, I'm sure you remember kind of in doing that. And so I appreciate that support. Smitty, I concur that, and Andy and Chris for the support financially.
yeah. The other thing I would like to recommend to council, or what I would like to see, is that when we do meet in September, and if things look favorable, if John and Deb both think things look favorable, I would like to put that zip line in because they're not wrong. It was something that they thought they were going to get last year, and when we went to go dig, it was not in the budget. So the Citizens for Central Park is not wrong on the zip line, and it's something for the kids to do. It's a thing, and we priced it out, and it is. So,
What is it got? Have a footer on it for $12,000? It's just a wire with some pulleys. I don't get how $12,000.
It's enough. It's heavy enough to hold adults like you, Andy, when you go out and have a cocktail and decide to slide.
I'm only 190 pounds. I'm only 190 pounds now, Smitty. So
That's why it breaks, is because those adults are using it, not the 10-year-old kids that are.
True. Like it gets cocktailed up and wants to go slide to slide.
and the last one they had, and there was probably $100, and it lasted 20 years.
That one was broken all the time. This one is, it's actually cheaper than any I was able to find when I looked. I saw some up to 20, 23,000. So this is a good pricing. Good job finding it.
How long is this thing?
I don't recall. I don't imagine it was any longer than the other one, but they've got to be fairly sturdy and secure. It's, liability issues.
From a safety aspect.
It's got more safety.
You can try to lock it at night. If there's a way to get it locked at night, would be a really good thing.
It's probably got more safety features on it, Andy, now, and what we used to be able to get. I mean, it's just
Seatbelts.
Good. Must have something to carry the kids too. Jeez.
So, but anyway, that's, if we can, come September and look at that. I know it's not going to do any good for the kids for the summer, but maybe it'll do some kids for something for the fall if we can get it back in there.
Yeah, but just
Our responsibility.
so the audience knows, the park is open. When this is lifted, the park will be open. So it's the playground will still be usable without it.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I'm just watching some stuff on Facebook. People, once it opens, it's open, just minus a zip line.
Yeah.
If I could also just add that the budget as currently presented to you has plenty of funds in there to maintain the playground that we already have. So the idea that we're not maintaining the playground, at least as it currently is not correct. We will maintain the playground as it currently is.
Yeah. So I mean, but other than that, I'm good with the way this has been presented. I'm good with using the funds and regrouping in September. And as long as everybody else concurs to that, I guess do we need to have a motion? We don't have to have a motion or for anything, do we?
No.
I'm just taking direction at this point. So if there's consensus to make a change, I will make that change and we'll bring it back. And then that will go to the public hearing, and then you'll get to make final action after the public hearing. So
Do we have to make a motion to send it to a public hearing?
That's not done yet.
We'll have to, but I would say when you get an update based on our tweaking.
Right, that's right.
The public hearing that I put out, the schedule that I put out was that we would do that on the 21st. We wanted to wait to make sure that you were okay with what you saw tonight. But then because of the advertising and the 1 week, only a weekly paper, the fastest we could do that would be the 21st. So I would like to make a commitment to getting the public hearing on the 21st. Then we can go for adoption the week after on the 28th.
Of June. Right?
Of May.
Right.
So we would be done a month early.
So we're gonna meet one more time to just go over this one more time. Is that what you're saying, or no?
No, I'm saying if you're good with it the way it is now, I would like to present this at public hearing on the 21st of May. Then following that public hearing, a week later, I would bring it back to you for formal adoption.
Okay. Can I get a motion from somebody to schedule a public hearing for this for the 21st of May?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Chris,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
Public hearing on the 21st. John, Mr. Hosey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that.
So, that's, if that's it, and nobody has any more comments or
I do.
okay.
Really?
I do, yeah. So, John and Deb, thanks very much for this. I can't even imagine how difficult it was because, having been through this as many times as I've been through it, it's never easy to take money from anybody. But I just want to say that other than the Mason Avenue restriping, which I believe could be deferred, I agree with everything you've done, including the community support. So I would throw out that Mason Avenue restriping could be done the following year, and that would cut that deficit another $15,000. I do want to thank you also for your explanation of the fund balance. It's something that I've asked about every year every year that I've been on council, and have never gotten an adequate explanation as to what it is, how it works, where it goes, and how do you use it. So I look very much forward to carrying this discussion on, particularly with regard to the deficit in the harbor. All of these things are new things that probably have been shown in numbers but never explained adequately, at least for me. And I am fully supportive of going forward to refinance the debt, particularly given the interest rates that we have right now. So again, I would take out $15,000 more, restripe Mason Avenue next year. And other than that, I think you've done a great job. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, you want to add something?
He did a spectacular job. He's almost a magician.
Andy,
Nah, we're good. I had
Paul,
I'm good too.
Does that mean we're taking out the 15,000 restriping or not?
No.
For the,
No, I've
No.
got something.
no.
I will respectfully disagree with Councilman Bennett, which
Well, the bottom line is you're not going to be spending that money in near term anyway. So
Yeah.
the way I see it is the earliest you're going to get is late fall,
right.
early next year, but it will be sometime next year.
Yeah, in
If we
21.
If we're still in deep trouble, yeah, we could talk about it in September.
Yeah, I think we can look at it again in September because it's not going to be striped until November at the probably earliest.
Just wait till it gets to be winter. Yeah, that's a good idea.
we're also got to wait for VDOT to say yay or nay.
And then it could be 10 years down the road.
Yeah, you never
Yeah.
know. It could be 2 years.
Okay, I've talked to them.
Tammy, do you have anything else?
That's it.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote. Chris,
Yes.
Bannon, yes.
Steve,
Bennett, yes.
Holloway, yes.
Holloway, yes. Paul,
Grossman, yes.
Buckholz.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much. We'll try to